The Franks stayed in the city for 1 month and 4 days. And while we were there, some of our men could not satisfy their needs. Either because we were there too long, or because they were so hungry, for there was no plunder to be had outside the city walls. So they ripped up the bodies of the dead, and others cut the dead flesh into slices and cooked it to eat. Our troops boiled pagan adults in cooking pots. They impaled children on spits to devour their flesh.
There is no such thing as a spiritual war. When you fight a war, the aim of that war is to defeat your enemy. They involve violence, they involve threats, they involve propaganda, and they involve, let's put it like this, shock and awe. And the eating of human flesh was designed to strike fear in the heart of the enemy. Here we are strong, we are tough, and if necessary, we'll eat you up alive. And to a certain extent, that succeeded. I mean, there was a wave of horror and fear. They eat us. And if they're eating us dead tomorrow, they might eat us alive.
To the leaders of the crusade, the barbarity that took place at Marat proved that their troops wouldn't tolerate any more delays. The time had come to fulfill their vows and seize the city that had inspired them to risk everything in the name of God. It made no difference that Jerusalem had recently fallen into the control of a far more conciliatory Muslim power, the Fatimids of Egypt, and that they were calling for peace. In June 1099, 13,000 Crusaders, less than a quarter of the number that had originally set out from Europe, arrived at the gates of the city where Jesus Christ had died.
When the Crusaders reached the walls of Jerusalem, they finally arrived at their goal. After 3 years, 3,000 miles marching, the most incredible suffering, terrible losses, they'd arrived at the holy city. Some were so overwhelmed with emotion they wept, others prostrated themselves on the ground. But now, of course, the hardest task of all faced them. They had to break in.
After 3 years of fighting, the Crusader army prepared to attack Jerusalem. The walls were 50 feet high and 10 feet thick. To scale them, they would need ladders and siege towers. But the Muslim defenders had razed the entire surrounding area of trees. The Christians sent out foraging parties to scavenge for wood. Hidden in a hole in the ground, they found 400 pieces of ready-prepared timber. It seemed, once again, God was giving them a helping hand. It was enough timber to build 2 50-foot siege towers with which to attack the walls of Jerusalem. Everything was in place for the final showdown. On the 14th of July, 1099, the Crusaders launched a 2-pronged assault. 2 siege towers were rolled into place, one to the northwest and the other to the south of the city. The Muslim defenders knew if just one tower breached the walls, Jerusalem would fall.
You can look up at these walls and imagine missiles, stones, arrows raining down upon you. The fighting was barbaric and intense, and at one point the Crusaders gave the phrase live ammunition its literal meaning. They captured a Muslim, strapped into a catapult and fired him back over the walls.
To the south, the Muslims pelted the first siege tower with pots of oil and flaming bolts, until finally it went up in flames. Now, only one siege tower was left, to the northwest of the city, under the command of the revered Crusader general, Duke Godfrey.
Godfrey decided upon a change of plan. I've got here an eyewitness account written by a man called Raymond of Aguillet. This is what he said. Godfrey moved to a position between the Church of the Blessed Stephen and the Valley of Josaphat.
Godfrey's plan was inspired. He had found the weak spot in the Muslim fortifications, but it was over a mile round to the northeast of the city. In the course of just a few hours, and under the cover of darkness, he had his men wheel the whole siege tower to the less defended part of the wall.